Recently somebody donated to me this beautiful slab of sapele, and it's really not often that I get to use wood as lovely as this, because 90% of the things that I build on this channel are made from reclaimed and salvaged materials. Over the past 6 months or so, I've gradually been building new furniture for my whole house. And one thing that I haven't built yet is an ottoman or blanket box. So that's what I want to get started on today. And I've already drawn up a 3D model of what I want to build using SketchUp. And I decided to do the build in the style of a treasure chest, just to make it a bit more interesting. The first thing that I need to do is to cut the material to create these 3 rectangles with mitre joints in each corner. One for the bottom of the box, one for the top of the box, and one for the lid.
I started by ripping a clean edge on the sapele slab at the table saw. And then I used that clean edge against the fence and ripped some pieces to 40mm wide. I did this in multiple passes to make life easier for my table saw, as this is a hardwood. Then I ran the pieces through the thickness planer until they were 40mm square. Next I wanted to cut a rebate into each piece. I set the table saw blade height to 24mm using the calipers, and then measured the distance between the outside of the blade and the fence at 24mm too, to give me a 24mm by 24mm rebate. Then I made the cut and rotated the workpiece before making the second cut to form the rebate. I cleaned up the corner of that cut with a chisel. Next I needed to cut the 45-degree mitres. I first made a cut to the end of each piece. Then I measured and marked up the rest of the cuts with a speed square so that I could line up the blade with the marks that I'd made to make the cuts in the right place. I applied glue to the mitre joints and used some packaging tape to help with the glue up. Then I fired brad nails into each corner, removed the tape, and cleaned up any glue squeeze out with a damp cloth.
So now I've got my 3 rectangular mitered pieces. This piece is for the lid, and I've got a piece for the bottom of the box and a piece for the top of the box. I've also got 4 of these pieces which were cut from the same material, and these will be my corner posts. I'm just going to offer these up, and I'll make some pencil marks so that I know where to apply the glue.
I used F-clamps to hold the upright corner pieces in place and left the glue to dry.
Just need to be careful to keep these edges as flush as I can possibly get them, and that'll save me lots of sanding later. And now I just need to double check that everything is square. The glue is now set, and these glue joints aren't going to be particularly strong at the moment, because obviously it's end grain to side grain, and that isn't as strong as side grain to side grain, but it is stronger than end grain to end grain. But the glue joints don't need to be particularly strong anyway, because I'm going to be adding internal cladding inside the box, and that's all going to be glued and nailed in, so the box will be much more rigid at that point. Next thing that I'd like to do is to cut a bottom panel for the box. So I'm just going to measure it up, and now I can look through my sheet material and see what I can use for the bottom. I found this nice piece of oak veneered plywood, so I'll use that.
I applied glue and used brad nails to hold the panel in place while the glue set up.
And that's a nice snug fit. I've had a little sort through the wood that I've got stored up, and I think I'm going to use pine to clad the box. I've got some long pieces of pallet wood like this one, and it's pretty dirty, but I'm hoping it will clean up okay. I've also got this piece which is really long. I should be able to get a few lengths out of that, and this piece is really clean. There's no knots in it, no nail holes or anything. And I am going to be pretty fussy when it comes to this pine because I don't want any knots or imperfections in the wood visible on the treasure chest. I'll need to cut the cladding to fit inside the rebate joint and on top of the bottom panel. And this piece is too long to cut on my mitre station, so I need to do it the old-fashioned way.
Once I could fit the piece on the mitre station, I cut the rest of the pieces to rough length just to make them more manageable, and I would cut them to their exact length later on.
I managed to get 6 pieces out of the longest piece of pine that I had, and now I'm going to cut them in half on the table saw, and then I'm going to try and cut them in half this way. These pieces are 25mm thick, so if I cut them in half I should be left with a workpiece that's around 12mm, and that will give me more material to work with.
I ripped the pieces in half on the table saw, and I also cleaned up the rough sawn edges too.
I've not really had much luck in the past with resawing on the bandsaw, so I've installed a new blade and I'm hoping I will get a nice clean cut. That worked out surprisingly well. The new bandsaw blade did the job nicely. It's now the following day, and after cutting the pieces last night I thought I'd leave them to rest overnight to see if they developed any warps or twists, but actually they're really good and straight. So ordinarily I would usually joint one face of each piece to get rid of any twist or warp, and then thickness plane the other, but I think I can just get away with running these through the thickness planer because they are nice and straight, and if I joint and then thickness plane I'm going to lose a bit of material, and I don't want to make these too much thinner than they are already. After putting a few of these pieces side by side to see what it might look like, I think I'm going to add a bevel to the edge of each piece. I think that might make it look a little more interesting.
I used a block plane to put a 45-degree bevel on each edge of each piece of pine cladding for the box. And then I sanded the cladding pieces. And I actually managed to get all of the cladding for the box out of the one large piece of pine that I had, which was pretty good.
I've got the box laid on its side now and I can start to add the cladding. This is just going to be glued and nailed in place. And I've just noticed a happy accident. These pieces of cladding will actually hide the brad nail holes that hold on the bottom panel, which is nice. On the long side of the box, the cladding pieces fitted nicely, but on the short side I need to make a cut. So I'll rip down one of these on the table saw.
Next I did some sanding to the sapele pieces, and the mitres came out really nicely.
Time to get started on the lid now, and the first thing that I need to do is to cut 3 semicircles out of sapele which will support the top cladding. The distance between the 2 rebates on the lid rectangle is 306mm. So I'll make a mark at 306mm and square that off with a speed square. Now I want to find the centre point for the top of the arc. I've got this piece of a flip up dining table top that I salvaged, and I'm going to use this to draw the arc. So first I need to find the centre point on this. So So I'll mark that up too. The height of the rebate for the lid is 22.5 millimeters. So I'll make a mark at 22 from the bottom. So now if I line up this centre point with this centre point and line up the edges with these marks, then I should have a good level arc. So now I can cut that out. So this should now slot in place. It does, and that's a nice tight fit. But these edges are slightly too high at the moment by just over 1 millimeter. So I'll do a bit of shaping to this curve on the belt sander. That's a better fit. Now I can use this as a template to shape one more piece. I've got the two pieces cut now, and I'm just going to compare them side by side and make sure that they're flush with one another. Looks like I need to take off a bit more material here. Okay, they match up really well now.